Physical Shop. I'm here today interviewing special guest Ignacio Esteban, and he's a retired ATF agent and author. And Ignacio, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey Laura, hey, thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I'm been retired from being a federal agent now almost 2 years, 26 years federal law enforcement. I worked mostly in Florida, in Miami and Tampa. And before that, I was in Miami, worked for U.S. Customs, and that was back in the 90s. And you can see the poster behind me, a book I have out there, which you mentioned too, ATF Undercover. I almost called it the accidental agent, to be honest with you. I was tossing around what kind of titles to give it in my ATF life, and I went with ATF Undercover, but it's really by accident, which I really end up getting into law enforcement. And I give a little background about me. I was studying at St. Louis University. For those who know who Florida, that's near Tampa. I had a bachelor's in political science and history, and then I had gone to Miami, and I was studying my master's at FIU, which is a big university out there in South Florida, Florida International University, International Relations. That's always been my background. Always been good at it. I had been accepted to law school, right, and I was going to go up there in Michigan. I think it was Thomas Cooley, and it was going to be cold at the time. And I saw there were a lot of openings in law enforcement. I said, I would have to get into debt because at the time, this is mid '90s. I'm probably looking at, I don't know, about $25,000 a year, $30,000 a year out of pocket. Didn't have a scholarship. I have to get loans for that. It's expensive.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
I can start working in a career in the federal government, right, and start making. They were looking for, and at the time, it's the mid '90s, and I got involved. There's a little side story here about me and my personal life. I got Windows 95, right, and I started using the internet, and I started doing dial up, and people were like, "Oh, so what's the internet? What are you doing? What's email?"
yeah. In
And it's like,
1995
what
with dial-up.
dial up, and you're beep. Remember all
Yeah, yeah.
that?
I remember. Sounds like a fax machine. Yeah,
Yeah, people were like, what are you doing? Family member, friends. It's like this is going to be the future, man. And I did it because they had a lot of job opportunities, and I think it was Fed World at the time, or U.S. government jobs, whatever it was, just easier to apply, and that's what got me on the internet. And I started doing that, and with the emails, it just pushed me there. And they were looking for custom Spanish speakers. Well, I grew up in Miami. My family, my grandparents came from Spain to Cuba, and then my other family came from Cuba to the United States due because of Fidel Castro and the Communist Revolution back in the
hmm
late 50s and early 60s. So, very grateful to this country. I was born in Los Angeles, California, in LA, but raised in South Florida. After the earthquake that kind of rocked LA in the early 70s, that was it. My family said, go over here. We're going back to Miami. But we've been
yeah.
through a lot of natural disasters, including Hurricane Andrew, which was pretty bad in the 90s. A little side story there. Um, so I, I applied for the jobs. They're looking, like I said, for Spanish speakers. They liked that I grew up in Miami, so I understood all the cultures. Because you grew up in Miami, and people who haven't been to South Florida, it's a gateway to Latin America. I
Yeah.
had friends from all over Central America, South America. I knew the different cultures. So that's what they wanted. They wanted people to able to interview passengers coming in looking for contraband in Spanish. They didn't want to have to use people who were non-Spanish speakers who didn't understand the culture and then try to find them using translators. That's what they didn't want at the time. So I put in for a job and I got hired. So I go from almost going to law school to be in the front line of the war on drugs, literally on the front line on the war on drugs. So boom. So now we're looking at 95. And about a year in after passenger processing, I go into the rover team and then the elite team. They have the contraband enforcement team in Miami. And in the rover team, this is covert where people walking, the guys walking around. I'm not sure if they still have it or not. They may have changed. They've gone from Treasury. Because at the time we were Treasury, and later after 9/11, they would go to Homeland Security under CBP. So we would get a lot of people who were like mules, right? Guys who will swallow these big pellets, right, inside. Very, very hard to sometimes to catch. And they could have sometimes easily, 3 or 4 pounds of cocaine, 3 or 4 pounds of heroin inside their stomach,
hmm
and it takes a process to swallow it. And I feel bad because a lot of the people there were forced to do it because they're peasants and they extort
Yeah.
them, or they tell them, hey, we're going to kill your family if you don't do it. A few people did get paid, but they didn't get paid much. right? And a lot of times, if we got like, we got someone who's dead on the flight, dead on arrival, it's because sometimes the pellets open up on them, it leaks, and that kind of purity of heroin will kill them, right? So
That's
a lot,
terrible.
yeah, no, no, a lot of times stuff like that. So that was interesting there when I worked the Rover team, because sometimes you have people, sometimes they have like a family. They were like these smugglers will hire their kids and bring them in and put the cocaine or heroin in their shoes, right? So
Yeah.
they would get very creative how they bring in. So this was something I would see in the front line, big seizures. Then I would join the contraband enforcement team, what they know as a set team, and make some of the larger seizures at the time in the country. It wasn't uncommon with flights from Colombia or Ecuador, where especially in Guayaquil, you have let's say a pound of cocaine next to a pound brick of ice inside a huge grouper or fish coming in, and we would seize easily 600-700 pounds of cocaine coming into the country,
Wow.
just like that, boom, coming in. So these were massive seizures, and the thing with customs, the difference with being being an investigator will be later, is I'm dealing with stuff at the border, right? I had border authority. That means I could seize everything and search everything coming in. I didn't need probable cause. I would
Hmm.
need that later to be an investigator, develop your case, but you don't need that in the border.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming from a foreign country is subject to search, and that's how you got a lot of these seizures that came in. They were enormous, and on top of that, there was enormous corruption at MIA, Miami International Airport. About a year on the job, and this opened my eyes big time. The chief of customs at the airport was arrested in a major sting, right? Our chief. So imagine that you've
Um,
been in a job, he's arrested in a major sting. The Miami Herald and other picked up on it. It was called tainted badges, where the agents had an operation set up. There was a local airport that was near MIA. It was called Tamiami Airport, for those who know it, and a lot of private airplanes would come in, right? So this one was
yeah.
supposed to be coming from Colombia. He would come in the weekends to clear it, right, himself with Hollywood Police Department and Honolulu Police Department. So he had two escorts with him. They would come in, they would clear the flight, and it had about 300-400 pounds of cocaine in it. And off it went down south to a different warehouse to be trafficked. And that was a chief going on doing that. So that opened my eyes pretty quickly what was going on. And on top of all the corruption, you also had the corruption with the ramp workers, which was stealing the stuff with a huge operation, and you have the longshoremen involved at the seaport, which was stealing. So the corruption was enormous at the airport, and you keep once I saw that, and then that triggered other guys who got arrested, unfortunately. So you do see a lot of that when you don't have a good compass, good moral compass, right, Laura? That's what
Yeah.
happens because I don't
Yeah.
care the amount of money it is because it's not worth my freedom. To me, my
No,
freedom
no, it's not.
it is everything. And to see the chief arrested like that, involved in that kind of corruption firsthand, I was only in my early 20s, right? I
That's
was only
crazy.
tw-
That's
tw- I was,
crazy.
I was 23 years old. Tainted badges in Miami. So that made an impression on me. I start I start interviewing for positions because I want to take it to a different level. I don't want to just be at the airport or seaport or somewhere where commerce. I want, even though we're making arrests and everything else, I want to be an investigator taken to a higher level of the cases. So I start putting in for because I'm networking, I'm making a lot of seizures. I'm networking because I seized everything, not just drugs. Also, we had seized outbound. We had the guns. We had money going out. We also had counterfeit credit cards, currencies. So I dealt with FBI, Secret Service, ATF, DEA. So I had a good network. So then I started,
Yeah.
of course, online. I started seeing the openings. So I started putting in. Unfortunately, at the time, Customs, which is what was called then U.S. Customs under Treasury, they didn't want, even though we were called inspectors, we had arrest authority, we had seizure and all that. They didn't want us becoming agents because that would be a loss of manpower. And then they had to retrain and all that. So that was kind of crappy. And I end up putting in for ATF and DEA, but ATF was the fastest. And the
Mhm.
good thing with ATF, I was picked up in 2000. I stayed at least in Florida. They stayed in Miami, but I went to my old stomping ground in near Tampa to start working their cases. So I started in 2000 in Tampa with ATF, and I was fortunate enough to get into a group where a lot of undercover work was being done because undercover work is not something you just get involved in, right? It's someone
Yeah.
you have to have a good mentor. You got to learn because if not, you're going to get hurt and bad things are going to happen to you. I mean, you really have to learn, and you have to be careful also with it, with who you're dealing with informants. And I'll talk a little about how tricky it is to be a handler. So I also was a handler. I did undercover, and ATF, as people may or may not know, is a lot smaller than the FBI and DEA. So I had to multitask, do a lot of things. I wore a lot of hats. I was a case agent. I was an undercover. I dealt with property, right? I did all my own workups because I wanted to take that case to a level. So I put some hard, long hours being an agent. Well, FBI and DEA, they can delegate some of that because they
Yeah.
have the support to give them. I didn't have that kind of support, so I was a one man team there a lot of times. So I
Yeah.
learned a lot from working undercover, especially from my partner, who was Puerto Rican, right? Which kind of helped. Even though at the beginning, I think you heard my book. I dealt with some adversity at first, especially those who didn't were not very receptive to Spanish being spoken in the office. They're very non-Hispanic, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
clashed, and I talked about that. And it's important when you deal with people like that, when they're bigots or they're racist or what have you, and they don't like a certain culture, they don't like, they're resentful because had time in Miami and now he's Tampa, and they try to intimidate you, right? You got to stand up to a bully. Don't ever be afraid not to stand up to a bully. And those who try to, if they don't like a certain way, or they think America should be a certain type of country. Well, America, as we know, is a diversity of people from all over the world, made by great people, not just from a certain region.
Exactly. Like Scottish Norwegian, but my dad born now naturalized as a citizen. So yeah, it's I mean it's
It's a melting
literally
pot.
a rainbow. It's a melting pot. Yeah.
It's definitely a melting pot of people. A lot of people don't like that. So yeah, there was some of that. I went to a different group, and my partner, Puerto Rican, and I'll tell you, he did a lot of good undercover. And one of his, I'll tell a quick story that he did because it's pretty famous. It was on Ripley's Believe It or Not after he retired, and some other places where he was involved in a shooting in the late '80s in Miami, in Hialeah, for those who know, in the Westland Mall. And he was coming in to do an approach of a vehicle coming in right here, and he came out. The SWAT team's on this side here. The bad guy opens fire. The bad guy has a SIG 9 millimeter. He has a SIG 9 millimeter, and when he fires the gun, it plugs into his barrel. So he's like this, and the bullet comes in like that. Instead of hitting him in the face, whatever, it goes right into his barrel. One in a million. He couldn't figure out. He kept on pulling the trigger, and nothing would happen. The SWAT team behind the vehicle takes care of the guy, opens up, and he's fortunate enough because he couldn't shoot anything. His weapon was inoperable because of the bullet plugging his barrel. Very lucky guy. Now I told him that was his day. That's his new birthday right there. That's his
That's
day.
crazy.
Yeah, that's the day he was born. That's his birthday from then on. So him and I became good friends. Worked a lot. I learned from him. He was Puerto Rican, so his first language was Spanish, and English was second. So his English was broken. So I started copying a lot of different things that I liked, and of course I didn't look like this way. I started letting my hair grow out. My hair was really long. I let my beard grow out, but I didn't get involved in the tattoos and all that because I
Yeah.
want when I'm done. I mean, some people love it. That's great, but when I'm done, which I have been done for a few years, I want to go back to where it was. Right? One
Yeah.
day at the barber shop with a good shave, all done, which I did when
Clean
I went.
cut and that's it. No more undercover.
No,
Yeah.
no more UC. I'm not gonna be sleeved out. Like some people were
Yeah.
massively sleeved and all that. I want that world behind me because I don't want that. Still, people are like, oh, what's this guy? That's kind of weird. What's this up to? No, that's good. Yeah, if you can do fake tattoos, maybe that's great. But at the
I have
time,
a couple I have a couple myself, but they're kind of like in places that I can hide on my back and all that because I didn't want to stigma like professionally, working at a law firm, government law firm. Like,
and some
hey, she
people,
has a sleeve and she has this and Mexican
yeah,
American, all that,
no,
like gangbanger or whatever,
yeah,
which is
she's
completely the opposite. Yeah.
right. And then you say, oh, maybe she's involved with the gang or what have you, and
Hmm.
you're hide, and then you got to hide that stuff. And it's sad. So that's why a little side story on the tattoos why I didn't do that. So I learned a lot from working with him. I learned a lot from others, and I built my own style, and I became really good at it. So I started doing a lot of undercover work, probably around 2005, 2006, right? And I went all the way into like maybe 2018. I did a lot with, ATF does a lot. If you don't know, with repeat violent offenders, street gangs, armed drug traffickers, international firearms traffickers, domestic firearms traffickers. We deal a lot with armed home invaders, murder for hire
Hmm.
cases. So it's a lot. The worst of the worst, the most violent is what ATF
Yeah.
does. the trigger pullers, right? The guys who
Yeah.
are a big problem, to get them off the street and get them a good time, 15, 20, 30 years. And I got a lot of guys a lot of time, really bad guys off the street in Florida, lots of time. So that gave me a lot of satisfaction. And sometimes you even take guys, yeah, you had those, and you had those who were like dirty FFLs, federal firearms licensees, which we also worked, who were flipping guns, putting it into bad guys' hands. And I worked a lot of
Yeah.
cases where I worked my way up to through the organization. I deal with all kinds of people. When you deal with firearms trafficking, you're dealing. I dealt with a dirty FedEx employee who was from Puerto Rico that he was already convicted for firearms trafficking, selling me guns. Busted him. Who his supplier was a high school teacher who was out of
Mm.
Central Florida. He was selling guns on the side. He was getting bad. Who dealt me with a federal firearms licensee who was supposed to be violating the public trust, supposed to be doing backgrounds and telling me how he's cooking the books. I mean, I'm undercover role. He said, "Oh, good, you're sending these guns out to Mexico, wherever. Fantastic. That's even better because that way, don't worry about it. I won't put it in my books. I order them, but the A&D book, I don't put them in there. That way, ATF will never know all the books, all the guns I'm selling you under the table."
Yeah, it's all under the table, and the international's even better to cover his tracks
Yes,
up
yeah.
there.
So I took care of those guys too. So like that gave me a lot of satisfaction. And then I went from Tampa. There were some, and you heard my book. They had some issues there. Like you said, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly of ATF. You deal with some good supervisors, and I had some doozies. I had some real bad
Yeah.
ones. Just like anything, nothing's worse when you're doing a big case and you're putting the effort in, and you have your supervisor undermining you, or worse, you have a prosecutor which is incompetent or lazy, and really takes the legs out of your case. That people don't know that. That's part of the frustration you have to be as an agent. You have to deal with those two because you can't prosecute your own case. You have to rely on others, and there's good ones, and I've had some real good ones and some real bad ones, unfortunately.
And let me add that to the flip side to that, because I worked with U.S. attorneys formerly, and they would complain to me about lazy agents, not
Right.
ATF, not
Right.
ATF actually, other agencies which I won't name. Some one of the main ones that referred cases to us, and that she's like, I have a lazy agent, and I needed to look up these reports or pull these and that, and I'm like, well, I collect money, but isn't that like something the agent can do in the field, or do surveillance, or do go get deed images from the county for mortgage fraud? Like, I'll gladly do it. It's just,
Oh,
it's just kind of
I
like outside
agree.
my wheelhouse. And she said, well, I have a lazy agent, blah, blah. And I'm like,
I
well, can
worked with
you
them.
ask for a different agent? Like, I mean, I'll help you with that. I don't mind, especially if it's going to help, get them more time or more evidence. And so yes, but I do agree. There were some of the
There's some,
prosecutors, most of 90% of them were great, but then you got like the little few that were either in a bad mood because they're working, staying up till midnight working trials. I mean, I get that,
yeah,
but
and there's some who don't want to do the cases right, and
yeah,
they
and there's just some that don't want to do. Yeah, if there are 50 steps, they just want to skip some things, and
and
like,
perhaps Miami and Tampa wasn't so much. Tampa had some good ones because they're more lifers. The issue with Miami and people who don't know is Miami is a lot of them just want to do 2 or 3 years and go where the big money is with a big law firm. They want to know how it works, the inside track, right? So they can be better defense attorneys and expose the weaknesses. So they weren't there really to do cases. They were there to learn the system. And then 2 or 3 years, it was a huge rotating wheel out of there, going out of Miami because
yeah,
law
revolving
firms
door.
pay enormous for that kind of info. So a lot of them, I just did not like them. Tampa, very different. Tampa, I worked with a lot of good, and they stayed there for life. The lifers were good. The ones that are looking to leave as soon as they can, not so good, and not so good. And they took advantage of that when they became defense attorneys. You can tell that they were completely different people. That's a little inside ball there. My experience, 26 years, what I saw, unfortunately, not good.
No, totally, because retired federal defenders, when they became criminal defense attorneys and went to the other side, they were like completely different people.
Yeah.
They were like, all of a sudden they were like telling me, oh, this poor child predator got 15 years even with the plea agreement, didn't go to trial. And then I looked at what he did to a 9-month-old, and I'm like, no, I'm going to be collecting whatever money I can in restitution. Sorry. But before, when he was a federal defender, before he retired, he was all about like justice and all that. So yeah, no, you're right. They do flip the script, especially when they go
Oh
to
my goodness.
the dark side of criminal defense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little inside track there for people who are watching who may not know that. Unfortunately, that does happen. It's human nature. Some people come in there for objective is mighty dollar, which is fine, but when you're there, at least do your job. that,
Yeah, yeah, I
that,
agree.
that was my issue in Miami. Miami's very unique too in that. Miami is you see a lot of that stuff there. So I did a lot of the cases, like I said, working undercover, dealt with some of the problems. And you see a lot of the waste, fraud, and abuse, and there were some examples there too. I mean, so imagine I'm risking my life. I'm doing a lot of dangerous cases. I'm working undercover. You have a supervisor who's not supporting you, right? And I put in the book there, and in fact, he was abusive with other people, and he would take. We had an undercover car. I think I mentioned it in the book, and you heard it of an H2, a Hummer, which is a very high end vehicle. It
Yes.
doesn't get a lot of miles, maybe 9 miles to the gallon, right? High
Yeah.
maintenance. It's meant for undercover work, right? That's what we had it for. But this supervisor, it's in my book, didn't like another agent either, so he wanted to take the vehicle away so no one could use it. And that's not meant to be a personal, everyday use car. Anybody knows that.
No, it's not. It's meant to be like off-roading when you're, going after the bad guy or whatever, going
It's,
out in the middle of
it's
nowhere to make a gun deal. Yeah.
right. It's a show car, right? It's a flash car. Man, this guy has
Yeah.
money. This guy knows. It's
Yeah. So you
impressive.
look like a gun dealer too, because you have to look the part when you're
You have to look
undercover
at that.
too.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's
Yeah.
for undercover purposes. It's
Yeah.
not for this guy to take it, and it sticks out for surveillance. This guy will
Yeah.
also use it for surveillance. You imagine
Oh my God.
a yellow Hummer. You
I
imagine
would
a
I would
yellow
never
Hummer.
drive by because I did a little bit of drive-bys, on businesses and assets, and I would never drive
How
by
about when you're
something like that.
following?
That's ridiculous.
How
Yeah.
about when you're following a target and you got a guy with a yellow Hummer?
Yellow's even worse. If it
Yeah,
was black, maybe, but
no, yellow.
oh
No
my
white
God,
color.
yeah.
No, it stands out. It's
He,
ridiculous.
he's a
I
typical narcissist. Yeah, he's a narcissist.
Oh,
This
you
guy.
can't make this
Yeah.
stuff up. Unfortunately, that's why I
No.
say people read the book. There's so many good stories of my experience there. So he's the type of guy that for over 4 years, 4.5 years, maybe 5 years, because when I got in the group, I saw him already have it, and he was driving that back and over 40 miles one way, back and forth, back and forth. He had to gas up each time he came into the office, go back. He was spending, I would say, easily. It cost Tampa Field Division over $50,000 or $60,000 easily, except if you had a regular government car.
Yeah, it
Why
costs the
did he do
taxpayers. The
that?
taxpayers. Yeah.
Yeah, our tax
With
dollars
the
to waste
government credit card. Yep. With the G car and the G card.
everything,
Yep.
and they're expensive vehicles. The tires are
They
expensive.
are. Yeah.
Everything is expensive, folks. It is ridiculous that he even drove that. Had a big blowout with him because my same partner I was talking about, the Puerto Rican guy, nice guy, right? They had an issue. He had gone to Mexico and other stuff, and he kind of wanted me to turn against him, right? And because that's the way people are. They want to use people and stuff like that. He wanted me to have lunch with him. He didn't want me to talk to him anymore. He wanted me to shun him. A guy I worked for many years, my pretty much a mentor, and turned because he was angry at him. He's the type of guy. He was the type of guy that had a little pinky ring. He wore his chains right there. He's from the certain New
Mm.
York area, right? You know the person I'm talking about, and he wanted to control his power. So this is kind of things to worry about. Not only I have to worry about my case undercover, everything else, my family life. I got to worry about people like that who trying to screw me in the office. I didn't do it because that's not the kind of person I am. I didn't do it. He made my life absolutely impossible. Impossible. I was having meetings with the ASAC and stuff like that. He even had me trace some weapons that almost got me hurt on an undercover deal, which you don't do. You don't trace the weapons until they're done. And later we had a meeting with the ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, and I was telling him about it. He was interrupting every time, saying, "Are we done with this? We have to listen to this." And nasty, say, "Keith, we're going to listen to this." And he yelled at him, "You're not going to," in front of the ASAC, screaming at him, "You're not running my group," bah, 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 yelling at the ASAC and everything. I said, "Man, I knew I'm toast here."
And just for those that don't know, the ASAC is generally
Number
the
two, yeah, number two in command for
the
the field
yeah,
division.
the vice president, agent in charge, right?
Assistant Special Agent in Charge. The SAC
Yeah.
is the Special Agent in Charge of the field division. That was in Tampa. I had a meeting later with the SAC, Special Agent in Charge, and she knew all the situation. And she was from Miami, and she told me that I wasn't going to win the situation. The well pretty much had been poisoned for me, and I had pretty much a weekend to decide where I wanted to go. But Tampa was not going to be an option for me anymore. So I had a weekend, and I said I didn't want to go to headquarters yet because I knew what was going to happen. I come back Monday, she'll find me a special little home in headquarters. And I hate to say, folks, this is the reality of what happens in the government and everything else. And pretty much deeming me like a whistleblower. And it's in all my book and all that. So I pretty much talked to my wife, and I said, well, my grandmother is sick. My dad had passed away. I put in my book, tragically, from pancreatic cancer. So and I go through a lot of that stuff too. So you're dealing with a lot of things. And you got to be learn how to deal with all this stuff at work, the bad guys, family issues, everything. You have to be able to multitask really well, especially in this job because they don't care. People don't care. They say, all right, let's go back to Miami. And she said, and I told back, I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind going back to Miami. My grandmother's sick, etc., helping her out. My mother is by herself. I mean, my dad had passed away and helping. And I was, oh, how wonderful. Just like that, how wonderful, how exciting. You're going to meet new people. Very, very sarcastic tone, just like that. And I knew I had no chance. So if I went on my own dime on this one, had to pay for everything. We rented out our house, and off we went to Miami. I like Tampa because Miami is. I mean, I spent a lot of time there. It's a lot more crazier and a lot more issues to deal with in South Florida, which I would deal with. Any
Yeah.
questions?
Well, that's crazy. So, what was it like after you moved to Miami after
Yeah.
that?
So Miami, you know, it's different than Tampa. I had a lot of good friends in Tampa. I had a very close relationships with Pasco County Sheriff's Office. We worked a lot of big cases dealing with violent gangs and everything else. I had friends there. I also made in Miami. People I had worked for before with customs. I would work with also in South Florida, making good cases, uh, dealing with OCDF cases, armed drug trafficking cases, dealing with firearms trafficking cases. Made some good friends there, but there was a lot of in politics also. I unfortunately had a bad female supervisor boss who was there,
Um,
who was really bad, and she had some serious issues there, which made everyone's life very difficult. So that's one thing that people understand is you have to do your cases and be working, but you have a lot of stuff you have to deal with. Hey, there's Bill.
yeah, we could see. Hi, Bill. Bill Steele here is a
My
good friend of both of ours, and he's helped me a lot with being a fellow author like us and
yeah.
the public relations. So just giving a shout out to Bill Steele. And
I'm co-host on Steal the Spotlight every Saturday.
yeah, so check that out with Steal the Spotlight. Ignacio's co-hosting every
Yes,
week, and I
shout
also
out.
want to say hi to Tracy James. She's an author that I'm publishing for now, and
Oh, nice.
Bill had an interview with Tracy James about the Gilgo Beach serial killers. We're gonna get into that too because you
All right,
also have a
I
book
talked to
on
that with
serial
Bill.
killers. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and we wrote a
it's,
book about that. That's amazing. So we'll talk a little bit more about serial killers when we're done with the story here. But it's just that's a frustration, difficulties in that kind of. I want people to understand that it's a dangerous job, and then you have people trying to undermine you, trying to get to you, which can end up getting you hurt or worse or killed. And hi, Laura, and that's a great show. Oh yeah. Uh,
yeah. So thank you for your undercover work because I'm more of a desk jockey. I mean, I was in the military before and
yeah.
all that. Didn't see any action. September 11th, they gave me a gun for about 9 months and said, "You're security forces now instead of a medic," which was kind of interesting. And being in Alaska when it was like negative 50 degrees, but
I've
other
been to
than that,
Alaska. I've been to Alaska, but it was when I graduated from college in '93. My buddy and I went camping, but worked at the fishing canneries out there in Alaska, right in Nikiski. And I worked. It was half Japanese owned, and I spent the summer out there camping and traveling. And but I met. This is a little side story, and I want to write a story about. I might even write a short about these adventures. I dealt with some of the strangest people. You had three kinds of people in Alaska. You probably saw. We had college students there. You had a lot of migrant workers, right? Some of them illegally working there, and you had a lot of people who were like wanted outlaws, right? I met
yeah,
some guys from Hell's Angels out there.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. They just
And
it was kind of like a hideout for them over there.
yeah, what does he say there, Ignacio? So, what do you think of the movie Sound of Freedom? Oh, I've seen the trailer and the clips. I know William Steele saw. We talked about it on our last show. About anything that's realistic about bringing attention to child trafficking. I think that's important. I mean, I think he was an HSI agent. What I heard, I think Ballard was his last name, Tim Ballard, I think,
Yeah,
based on a true story. But I heard there was a lot of resistance from production companies because any faith-based productions don't do well with Hollywood for some reason. But it's done at what I've heard over 125 million in counting, which is
yeah,
fantastic. It did a lot better than Indiana Jones, so that's great. I think it's maybe even with Barbie, the Barbie movie. So
yeah,
that which
yeah.
is cool. But I loved Alaska. I spent some time out in Alaska in the summer there, and tough work. It's probably the toughest work I ever did in my life. Working in a fishing cannery, I worked there for about 2.5 months. Brutal conditions, freezing conditions out there, spooning, gutting the fish, stacking the fish. I was going to work on one of these boats, right? And so I met a lot of guys who had lost their fingers, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And they were telling me these stories. And being, if you're a greenhorn, say, yeah, you can make these catch, dangerous catch, those shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
Like the show. I mean, I was in Fairbanks, like a little bit colder. Anchorage is more, a little warmer by the ocean. And I went down to Anchorage before in the that area. I think it was Seward, Alaska, but I'm not like like an ocean bound person or anything. But yeah, the deadliest catch, I'm aware of it.
you were that, and I was talking to people who've done a lot of that. You make a lot of money, you get a percentage of the catch,
Yeah.
but it could be really dangerous. And I said, I'll stick with the cannery. I'm making good money here as it is, and I get to still see Alaska like I never. I love the Northern Lights. I had never seen that before. I enjoy that. Man, a lot of interesting people, and a little slice to Alaska. But I had some other adventures, which I'll probably talk about. Maybe write a book about what happened in Alaska. We'll
Yeah,
see.
you should write a book because Alaska is like a whole different place. And when I was stationed there in the military, they considered it
Yeah.
an overseas base, which I thought was kind of funny. And I was
They
there for
did, huh?
3 years. Yeah, it
Wow.
was. I'm like, this is not overseas, but it did feel like you were overseas. Just in a different country almost because it's so different.
The last frontier, right? That's
Yeah, it is. I felt like I was like in the Wild West, like,
what I felt.
back in time. And I lived in North Pole, Alaska, literally North Pole, Alaska, and like a little, Santa Claus house there in a little village. And I didn't have cell phone back then. I was there
No, you
2001 or
you you were near
2003.
you were in Nome,
Huh?
Alaska.
I was in Fairbanks, Alaska,
Fairbanks.
2001 to 2004. And, there were no cell phones back then and none of that. And I remember my car broke down one time. It was -8. Fortunately, another military person saw me in my uniform and picked me up, brought me on base. But, it's no joke living in that kind of, and I'm
No,
a California girl. I'm from San Diego, originally. So
I was in the
that's no
summer.
joke.
I was here in the summer, so in the summer, it's like it's sunlight almost all day, right? It
Yes.
goes
Yes.
away,
So
yeah, and then at night they call it I guess in the wintertime they call it the fog. It was dark almost all day. So
yeah, yeah. So the summer solstice is when when the I think the highest point is about mid-June, and that's when you have like 20 hours of just daylight. And so
yeah,
people would go fishing on base. At
yeah,
2 in the morning, you see people going fishing on base
yeah.
because there's it's like sunlight. And then in the winter, a lot of people got cabin fever and depressed and stuff like that because then it's dark. The sun would, I remember, come out like at lunchtime and then go back down. And that's it. And I was working, and so it was dark. And I would remember waking up and putting on my uniform, and it's 3 in the morning. I think it's 3 in the afternoon. And I'm like, I look at my little old school
I had this
alarm
comment.
clock, and I'm like, no,
Yeah,
it's 3 in the morning. And I got scared, and it wasn't, because it's just crazy. And
it's definitely hard to sleep when you have the light on like that, and especially when you're camping, you're in a little tent like that. It's definitely very difficult to go down that way.
oh yeah, oh yeah. So yeah, I think that would be a great book for people to read. So yeah, that would. I didn't know you were in Alaska. That would be great. And so let's get into a couple things that have just been on my mind because you're more a security guy. I'm more of a desk jockey after post military, and I was in the Air Force right before September 11th. September 11th happened. I was actually visiting at home on leave here in Northern California, and it happened. And I was told, well, you're going to be deployed, so either come home or you're going to be deployed at a Travis Air Force Base in Northern California. And of course, I didn't want that. And I said, well, I'm a pharmacy technician. I wasn't like the type of medic or field medic that would normally be deployed. So obviously I wanted to avoid that because, what had just happened September 11th. And I rode a military plane on the way home. I think it was a KC-135. And even the military flights that stopped and weren't going out unless you were deploying for like a couple of days. And then I ended up making it home on a military flight that stopped in Seattle and then Anchorage and then back to Fairbanks. So in your experience, during September 11th, were you actually a part of customs yet, or
Yeah,
if
I was at ATF then when that happened.
okay,
I definitely remember that clearly when those events happened, and I think like everybody else, it shocked the world. I was about to go training in Pensacola. We do quarterly training, and it was canceled while we were looking at events that unfolded and trying to figure it all out. What's going on here? What's next? And obviously, the horrors that happened, and watching all that like everybody else did. It's just awful.
yeah, yeah. And actually, my husband's from New York, and he
Oh
actually
wow.
had buildings in the World Trade Center but he worked in Long Island, his satellite office, and actually, I think he was scheduled to have a meeting in the World Trade Center that week, and it ended up happening. It didn't end up happening, thank God. And but my husband knows a guy who was special forces in the army, who was in one of the towers when it happened and survived. And the guy said that they were being told not to leave the building and this and that. He just had an instinct, I guess, from special forces, like, leave, get out of here. And so
Yeah.
he did. He actually was able to get to the lower floors. He ran down the stairs, like, 30 flights or something ridiculous. He kept on running until he went to, like, I don't know if it's a Brooklyn Bridge or whatever big bridge is the nearest one. And he kept going and going and going. He ran like a couple miles. He looked back. Obviously, it got a lot worse. He made it out. And, his instincts, those special forces instincts, my instinct would have been the same. Being ex-military, just like, get out. Don't, especially something that is just so vertical like that. And he made it out. And I thought that was interesting that he, told my husband that story.
And a lot of first responders, man, didn't make it out. They were going up while people were coming down, right? And they lost their lives. A lot of them lost their lives. New York Fire Department, NYPD. Never forget that. That's for sure. I had a chance from a trial with a really bad guy, which we get him almost 30 years for armed trafficking and supposed to get involved in a conspiracy to do a home invasion, and he ends up. We're in New York, in Manhattan. We have the trial, and had a chance to go check out the location there. We have the memorial, 9/11 memorial, and you see the cascade there with all the names. If you haven't seen that, everybody I think should check it out. They really, and I had a chance to take a tour of the Freedom Tower and go up there too, which is really touching. That was a few years ago. I think everybody, if you have a chance to go out there and check that out.
Yeah, so I haven't seen that yet, but I do want to see that one day.
Oh, you should. Yeah,
I've gone to DC for some training and stuff, but yeah, and saw like the Lincoln Memorial and some other things. But yeah, that's on my list to go see that memorial. I think it's really important.
That's in New York. Yeah, that's in New York.
Yeah, in New York. Yeah, in New York. If we go back anytime here soon.
So, do you want to continue from where we left off, Miami?
Well, I was going to get into January 6, 2021, but if you want to finish off with your Miami, let's hear that.
What my story, how I got also into writing. I think people like that too. I see some people are having issues commenting here. They have some restrictions going on. I don't know what's going on. Bill says they restricted his account.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I don't think so. Let me see if I can show one of his comments.
They restricted me from commenting. Bill put there.
I can see his comment now. He says, "Now I can again?" Question mark.
Yeah.
Okay. Go.
He's been five hours. He's been restricted or something. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, Facebook. Yeah, Facebook probably did that again. I think he can do Messenger here, but I don't know. I'm seeing his comments because.
And you said you got it backed up to Rumble too, right?
Yeah, I have it backed up to Rumble. So even if they take it down, then
you never know how Facebook are. That's a good idea because it's.
Yeah, I'll put it in the comments too. It's under Laura Leone Soul Dreamer, and I'll put my name there. So if they do this censorship thing, which is horrific, I will put it there.
So real quick, I had, like I said, issues with the other supervisor and overcome. Eventually, she had other problems and get transferred out of the group and everything else. And I went to a firearms trafficking group, which exclusively worked international firearms trafficking and domestic firearms trafficking, and worked a lot of cases. Became very good friends with this supervisor. Good friends. We had a tight relationship. But like I said, I was doing undercover work for over 14 years, 15 years at least, right? I decided to want to change, and I promoted. It took me about a good year to promote, and I ended up going to headquarters. And I was able to see behind the scenes because I went all the way to field management staff up there, and I worked a lot with the number one in command from the central region. So anything from like New Orleans all the way up to North Dakota or what have you, and everything in between, Chicago and all the big cities, I'll be working. Later, he'll become number two in command overall. So he became very good friends, and I saw a lot, and we gave a lot of briefings to the director at the time, what was going on. So it was interesting for me to see ATF at that level. So I was on the street level, and then all the way to the top, and with some of the most sensitive briefings, and watching how that transpired, and having that kind of relationship, gave my intake, my ideas, what do you think about this or what have you, was really interesting. I'll tell you that. Um, and then I retired in 2021. I had over 21 years ATF, like I said, 5 with customs, almost 26 and a half years federal law enforcement. And I spent the summer traveling. COVID had just really finished, so I took my family cross country. We went from up there to Niagara Falls, to Chicago, and then the Dakotas, which was beautiful. If you haven't been there, Mount Rushmore. I don't know. Have you been there out there in California? Have you been to Badlands?
No, I've probably been to every other national park, but not Badlands. No.
Badlands is gorgeous. It's like Jurassic Park. I mean, they have so many
Yeah.
fossils there about millions of years ago, which is unbelievable. It's hot. I was there in the summertime. It was hot, but Mount Rushmore is gorgeous too. If you haven't been there, the Black Hill Mountain. So we took a trip, came back down, and came back, and I started thinking, what do I want to do now? And I took a liking to writing. And I had my sister-in-law. She was in the publishing business for many years, over 20 years, right? And she had a little fallout, whatever. And she gave me suggestions about going to Amazon Kindle self-publishing. He said, you might want to look into it if you're having some issues with publishing companies about everything you want to do. So that's what I did. I started looking into it. I said, this is a great fit for me. I get to publish what I want. I write it. I mean, obviously you can't put bad things there, but anything material you want doesn't get. I'm the editor. I did my own book covers, and I market myself, and I keep 80% for digital books, which is pretty good. So I've been doing that for almost 2 years now since I retired, writing from all different topics, from politics, true crime, and I also did. I mentioned those places. I even do travel books, and all the places we've traveled, I do picture books also, pictorials, which people also love going out there too. So, and I even did 5 or 6 books with my youngest daughter, kids books. I know you like kids books also.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wrote a children's book recently. I'm writing more now, but
That's great.
not.
Fantastic.
So I'm also doing a Spanish version as well. My dad, is a native speaker, and I'm okay on Spanish, más o menos.
Más
But
o menos.
so
Okay.
más o menos, sí. So it's quicker for me to answer in English, and less like lazier. But but yeah, so my dad helped me translate my children's book, and
Oh,
so
that's good.
we're gonna have the Spanish one, and then I'm gonna do a geometry. As an accountant type, I love geometry space book next. But yeah, I know you wrote over, is it 70 books now? I mean, that's crazy.
74. I have most of them are short books, but then I was able to put some together, and I have some long books, some medium books, and some short books, which is nice. And now I'm pushing them now into Audible. So if you like to listen to books, ATF Undercover is available in Audible. And I like the other books. I have one that's going to be 7 hours long. It's going to be called the most dangerous crime syndicates of our time, and that should be coming in talking about the Cosa Nostra. He's going to be talking about the outlaws, right? The one percenters, talking about
Hmm.
the cartels. I mean, I go into depth in the yakuza, street gangs, prison gangs. I mean, I really go into a lot. So if you like, just let's say I want you to study prison gangs, well, I got a book for that. I want to talk one percenters. Well, I got 7 books on the one percenters, from Hell's Angels for Sonny Barger to Taco Bowman, the Outlaws, to just one percenters, to the Mongols. All that. I know you're in California, and the Hell's Angels and Mongols have always been beefing there. Plus, you
Oh
have the
yeah,
Mongols and the Banditos and all the different groups there. So I have a lot of books,
MS-13s. Yeah.
and I did book that too. And La Mara Salvatrucha, right? They didn't start in El Salvador. They were Salvador immigrants that started here, and then came back down and brought it over there again after massive deportations. And MS-13. A lot of people may not know this. I'll throw this out there. Anything with a 13 has a loyalty to the Mexican mafia, la M, right? That's the 13th
Hmm.
letter of the alphabet. So when you see Thir 13, when you see MS-13, when you see all these other groups who have a 13, that means they have loyalty with them. So interesting. So look for that stuff, and they have a lot of control in the prison, but then they have a lot of control outside with all their foot soldiers. Very dangerous.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Very dangerous.
And let's just say we had so many MS-13 and Hell's Angels cases. We were the largest district in California. Well, and when I would work there, it's still there. California Eastern District, basically everything from the Oregon border to the Mexican border, and other than the Bay Area, San Diego, which San Diego was heavily, as you would think, with ICE and Customs Border Patrol. And then LA had their own, but we were everything else in California, which was like over 8 million residents roughly. And let's just say there were so many cases that we opened up a little office with the FBI in Bakersfield because there were so many like Hell's Angels and MS-13 and
A lot of violent
Um,
criminals. Yeah.
yeah, violent criminals and a lot of even like police corruption out
That
of
sounds like
Fresno,
good
like the
ATF,
police, the
good ATF
Fresno
agent.
department, yeah, police
I
department.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, a lot of corruption for sure, and a lot of good cases for ATF.
Yeah, yeah, and so we had a lot of ATF agents we worked with too. I was more white collar and
I got you.
predator mostly cases, but yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I'll get some of those like little assessments to collect, and but a lot of forfeiture, seizures of criminal property. We had a U.S. Marshal and a special forfeiture investigator contractor, and they would do the seizure warrants, and I helped with some more asset type warrants. But yeah, it was it's nonstop. I mean, these cases just keep some cartels, some all kinds of stuff
Yeah,
like you would
yeah,
expect.
the street gangs and the cartels are getting tighter and tighter. No doubt about it, and they're pushing a lot of their drugs in the street level for sure, and they're extremely dangerous. I mean, I wrote a book on who's the biggest name now. I know Chapo. He's in the Supermax, right? Guzman. But Emencho
Mhm.
Cervantes for CJ&G has really become a major player, major rival of the Sinaloa cartel. And I wrote book about the rise of a narco empire, CJ&G, Jalisco New Generation, the battle for Guadalajara, and check that out. What's going on there? He's now the biggest bounty now for a drug lord. I think it's over $10 million the U.S. government has for him with Mexico. So Chapo is 5. This guy is 10. But of course, he pays
Wow.
his guys well. So even if you turn him in for 10 million, you look behind your shoulder the rest of your life. It's not worth it. Where he pays his group really well not to turn him in. So
Yeah,
check that out.
yeah, yeah. That's I came across a few informants that I was basically trying to collect restitution for victims, whether the victim was government or individuals or whatever business. And I was actually told hands off. And I was like, well, they owe the money. The judge ordered it. I'm going to collect the money. Like, no, leave them alone. They're a CI. And I'm like, I don't care. They got sentenced. They went to prison. Yeah, they got a better plea agreement deal. They owe the money. I'm going to collect like I do. And so I would bump heads with, those kinds of things. Like, no, they owe the money. They did the crime just because they ratted out 10 of their friends. Like, okay, maybe they got less time or whatever, got a good C1C plea agreement deal or something. But no, I can't, so I was like a bulldog. Like, I want to collect for
That's good.
victims.
You,
And so, especially if it's individual victims, and I would tell the attorneys, no, I'm going to collect. I'm going to file the liens. If they have assets, I'm going to help freeze them. And I got into it with an old timer paralegal. I'm an investigator, and I told her, no, I'm still going to collect on this guy. I'm going to do treasury offsets. If he gets a tax refund, it's going to go to the victim fund. Sorry, like if they're a CI and they get a deal with that prosecutor years ago, because you got to remember, he was already in prison for years now. We can collect decades after they get out. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm collecting. I'm calling the probation officer. I'm tracking him down. I'm calling the Bureau of Prisons. I'm going to do what I have to do. If he has assets, I'm going to go after him. And so, fortunately, the attorneys kind of sided with me on that kind of stuff. Because it's like, yeah, they got their little deal when they were doing their plea agreement. But now we're on the civil side, enforcing the money, and they need to pay and all that. And so
I see Tracy James has a lot of questions here. Are agents in ATF long? I'm not sure what that means.
yeah, I don't know what you meant there, Tracy. What do you mean long? Like,
I don't know
if you want to restate that one.
these cases.
And yeah, so Tracy's actually writing a book on her story. She did 3 years. She served 3 years in prison in upstate New York in
Oh wow.
Bedford, and she's writing her story on that, on how she went from someone who was an addict on drugs and incarcerated for that, and even in a psych ward, and her
Oh wow.
experiences there as a woman, in the woman lockup, which I think is different than probably Bureau of Prisons of the experience of male lockup, and just different, a little bit different.
Sure.
And
Cool.
so she's writing a book on that. She'll be publishing it with me here probably in the next month or so. And so I'll have her on the show too. I believe Bill will have her on again. So that's Tracy. Let me see if she. Oh, are they there long? So if you want to re-ask your question, Tracy, about the case agents, generally they have what's called LE time, and for LE law enforcement time, they get, since they're in dangerous jobs. Like I was not an LE agent, I was a civil agent. They get paid a little stipend, a little percentage higher because they're put in dangerous situations, and they're also forced to retire because, like my U.S. Marshal told me, "Oh, I'm 57 now, I have to retire." And I look at him and I'm like, you look good to me. Then, just like the military officers have a cutoff because it's a
Sure.
very physical job. We don't want a 79-year-old, no offense, running after a bad guy or a bad lady, and like, come on now. And so they have to have a cutoff for,
Right. Right.
where you can basically go through an obstacle course and, physically, go after a bad guy and go on foot and run after them literally and, just be physically fit, look the part, do the undercover. It's very intense work. You're working
Oh, it
weekends,
is.
working nighttime, you're working through Christmas, all this and that. You're missing, holidays with your family, and it's very intense. And so,
It's not for everybody, that's for sure.
no, it's not. And so, that being said,
Right.
just before we move on from the ATF undercover book in your life, there, what was it like, adrenaline wise, like going undercover with these guys and knowing, like, did you have to like work out and get yourself psyched up, drink some coffee? Did you
Oh
have to
no,
like
no.
meditate? Like, did you just
I
have to be
did.
like, let me just put on my hat backwards and then, speak in Cuban, Spanish and like kind of slang and like cut off, mess up a few words on purpose? I mean, it's acting. It really is acting.
It's
Like,
acting.
were you freaking out, or did you just befriend them so much after a certain point that you felt like somewhat comfortable?
To me, yeah. First, when you get nervous, for sure, when you first doing anything new, but it's like when you break in a nice pair of shoes, man. You just get comfortable with it, right? And
Yeah,
it just feels second nature. It's like breathing. You get really good at it, and you develop that relationship with it. But you always have to in the back of your mind know that anytime it goes south on you, you got to be careful, right? Be prepared to act. You got operational plans, and you got cover teams, and or you have to handle the person yourself. But always have your plan. Be ready in case things don't go right. And what is it? El Chapo's wife is in the feds too now, right? Yes, she is. And I think his son also got arrested too. But that's a Chapo. And one goes down, going back to the Sinaloa cartel. It'll be maybe his nephew, maybe the cousin. It'll be someone else. This one. I mean, remember, a lot of these guys, almost all these guys were semi-illiterate. They drop out of school at fourth, fifth grade, right? They grew
yeah,
up selling oranges or avocados in the street. And what they became good at, they became good killers, and they got respect for that. And remember El Chapo when he got interviewed after he escaped the second time was unbelievable. The tunnel that went right to the prison, right to his cell. He had a little moped, and when out he went. Remember that corruption? They bought everybody. Allegedly, he was so upset they were getting too loud. He was yelling in Spanish, "Everybody's going to hear us. What the heck are you
yeah,
guys doing?" And off he went with the moped. And then he does a famous interview with Sean Penn for Rolling Stone magazine with Kate Del Castillo out there in the Sinaloa Mountains after he escaped. He's a fugitive, one of the most wanted fugitives in U.S. Mexico history, and he's doing an interview with Sean Penn out there. That's something, right? It's brazen, right? He
yeah.
almost
That
caught
is brazen.
he almost caught him. He almost caught him because of they tracking her phone to him, but he was the master of the tunnels. They come rápido, and he was able to escape through his tunnels. He had a network, a labyrinth of tunnels all over. Very good, very interesting stuff there. I write about that in my books on El Chapo Guzman and Mencho Cervantes. Very different guys, very similar. And Mencho, he is prior law enforcement, dirty, right? He was in the United
Mhm.
States, heroin trafficking, got deported. I just get a quick briefing, but he didn't do the same mistakes that, let's say, Pablo Escobar did in Colombia, where had a big house in Medellin, a palace, or so did this guy, El Chapo. He lives more modestly. He has a tight security team, and he's always hiding different homes in Guadalajara, moving around. And if things get hot, they move quickly. If he doesn't recognize something, keep it small, keep it tight, and move fast. A little different. So things to watch with Amencho, the most wanted drug lord right now in Mexico, Amencho Cervantes.
Oh, Metro Cervantes. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know about that guy. But I'm
CJNG,
also,
Jalisco New Generation, the biggest rival now for Sinaloa. Estimated worth, according to the U.S. government, $50 billion in assets with a big B. 50 billion. A guy who's selling avocados growing up.
okay. So he's basically the rival of Sinaloa cartel.
Yeah, yeah, they're big
Okay.
time rivals, no doubt about that. But El Chapo, he's in the supermax, and you see those pictures. If you haven't seen it, he's in a tight little cell, just looking up there like this, all frustrated. And allegedly, he wants to cooperate now with the government. Well, what's he going to do? What's he going to say? Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, thank you for all that insight. That's great. So I just want to get into one other, I guess, big topic, and that's going to be January 6th, 2021. Basically your take. I'll give you my input. Like, for me as a veteran and working at Department of Justice at that time, hearing what happened. Of course, I'm way over here in California. It was a sad day to hear that for me, and that people died, and that I had friends previously that were stationed in the Pentagon. And by the way, my commander during September 11th was in the Pentagon, and actually he survived. And he didn't really give us a lot of information, maybe because it was secure. But um, you know, it was just sad to hear what had happened, and I was in shock. I felt like it was almost like a mini September 11th, and so I was actually recruited to work in DC because we had so many people in our district that were prosecuted and related. That flew over there locally. One of them lives down the street from me, like a few miles away. So this, even though I'm not, on the East Coast or anything, it still is somewhat personal. And I did not work the cases because I had a 3-4 year old at the time, and chose to stay here during a pandemic time. And
Yeah,
for me, these issues are nonpartisan. Public health is nonpartisan. Public safety is nonpartisan. So what is your take on it, and what do you think happened? First of all, I read the book Plandemic because I was more into the medical freedom thing, and Mickey Willis, I think is his name. He did the documentary Plandemic and some other ones, and he went there to talk about health freedom at a rally down the street. He said he went to the back of the Capitol because that was his first time there. He went looking for other people, and it was pretty peaceful in the back, not like in the front. And that in the back they started letting people in, and then at one point the crowd around him were screaming out, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike
oh,
Pence." And he's a videographer because he does documentaries. He used to be a teacher years ago, and he got it on video. I haven't seen that video yet. I want to get a hold of it somehow. But basically to prove that he wasn't a part of this, because he's a nonpartisan guy, and he's not, he wasn't like part of the chanting. And I guess the New York Times interviewed him and then twisted it around and said that he started the chanting when he didn't. Actually, he got pepper sprayed, told two other guys, like, stop pushing the crowd, stop pushing. And
that's
he went
crazy.
to the side because he got pepper sprayed, but he has it all on video showing that he wasn't part of like the screaming crowd. And he was there for medical freedom. And actually, most people were. They weren't there for the other thing. They were there telling the guards, like, let me on the steps, let me in the back. I guess there's steps in the back. I've only seen the front when I was, working in DC. I didn't really go around the back or go close, but they were just trying to get in and said, hey, we're having a hard time feeding our kids. Our businesses are, shut down now, blah, 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 things like that. They were screaming out before they said the hang Mike Pence thing. They were saying that kind of thing. And so then he left because he had a feeling not to go in, even when they opened the back. And he
Yeah,
saw some windows had been like jarred open, and doors, like, obviously they weren't supposed to be. And he left. He had a bad feeling. And so that was what I read in the Plandemic book on Mickey Willis'
yeah. I mean,
account. So if
yeah,
there's anything security wise or anything that you can let me know that I'm missing, because my friends who were stationed in the Pentagon in the early 2000s, post 9/11 especially, told me there's high security. So what happened?
I mean, I'm like you. I saw what happened on television. I wasn't headquarters when it happened, and we were on. Some of us responded, and we were on. Like I said, I was in field management staff. So at that time, I was there. We had security briefings and everything else. I think like everybody else, you're scratching your head, and you're thinking, how did it get out of control like this? Where people get so worked up. In my opinion, I wrote a book about it. Joe Biden, one and done, based on everything happened. But you know, he and even Mike Pence said it. He certified the election. They lost the election. Bill Barr said it. They lost the election. His attorney general. He did not see anything there. He told the president he resigned over that, right? And he kept on pushing the biggest lie told in American history, right? He lost the election. So that I think caused a lot. If he would have told his supporters, you know, we fought hard, we had a good term, we lost, but you know what? That's democracy. I'll come back again in 4 more years and we'll win next time. That wouldn't have happened. That's my
Yeah.
my take. He incited it, and then why does he have all those classified documents in Mar-a-Lago after he was told to return to the FBI? Those even Mike Pence, even his attorney general. So those are the most serious charges. Not the one paying off the porn star up there in Stormy Daniels. Not the one possibly in Georgia for possibly tampering with the election. I think this is the most egregious piece, clear cut, classified documents. He had it. It wasn't where it should be secure, and he was told to return it, and he did not, including the operation to invade Iran. Why does he have out there? What was he going to do with it? And wasn't that lady, if I'm not mistaken, from China, a spy that was arrested in Mar-a-Lago, roaming around, right? And she had a USB device. Was she going to be there to take pictures? What was going to happen? I mean, I don't have the insight. I'm just piecing it together. What I'm seeing, was he going to sell the secrets to the Chinese? Why would he do any of that? Those are problems I see there, and he, in my opinion, does not deserve another term in office. All that together, and that's why I'm not saying I'm an RFK Jr. fan. I like Mike Pence. I would like to see him become president. I think he did a great job in Florida. I think he stood up to the COVID crowd, right, and he kept the business open, right, while most people cowered and closed and destroyed their economies. Florida's economy flourished. I think he'd be a good president. Some people think he's too young. I think he's just right. Kennedy was younger, right? Some other Barack Obama, Bill Clinton were younger. So we'll see. Politics is an interesting thing, but I kind of put it on him. That's just me.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I totally agree that words matter, and that inciting, especially from from the perspective of whether it's Twitter or rally or whatever. People are coming for blood. Some people are just coming to show up and riot, and they don't have any reason. They just want to because whatever, what the hell, it's fun to them, and they don't know or they don't care, and they don't think about people getting stomped on in the crowd, or even innocent police. I think there was a police that died, and then then to not show remorse after the fact, like that, hey, we stand with these, the families of these people that were stomped
Killed.
on or whatever. That wasn't, I didn't see that, and so
You
I
know how
agree
many,
with everything you
and a
just
lot of
said.
a lot
And
of Capitol police officers have committed suicide since then.
oh, I see. I didn't need to know that because I have military,
Yeah.
friends that have done
It took
that.
a
And
huge dramatic toll on them, the abuse and everything. Some of these guys were pulled out of the line and pepper sprayed and attacked and abused, and then thrown back like garbage. I mean, you got to watch. I did watch that, Laura. 4 hours in the Capitol, and those images are amazing. Everybody should watch that. Also, some other documentaries. Those images there and the abuse the Capitol Police took, they were understaffed, undermanned, and unprepared for that. But I put it all back on Trump. Everything that happened there, he should have said
yeah,
different things. He kept on pushing the biggest lie ever told by a president, and that the election was stolen. There was no proof. His attorney general that he appointed, Bill Barr, stepped down, resigned because he said there was not any evidence to support that at all. They,
yeah.
yeah. So
And I mean, FOIA's didn't show the evidence. I'm an investigator. We did FOIA's, Freedom of Information Acts. For those that don't know, are when you can get government documents, like the one that they got showing the Wuhan connection and the money that now Senator Rand Paul is, submitted basically a referral for Fauci saying he lied to Congress, because that can be shown in those, government documents via FOIA requests.
yeah.
I haven't seen or heard of any FOIA, and I binge watched several conservative type Rumble channels. I haven't seen any FOIA documents, any evidence, nothing to show, like you're saying, to support this
Yeah,
assertion. So,
I've been a Republican, like I said, my entire life. Obviously, my family came from Cuba, suffered from the hands of the communists. They were very happy, well off in Cuba. My family professionals, and they lost everything, had to start again. And I remember my grandparents and that. So it's hard for me to see Trump destroy the Republican Party as he has. But that's what's happened, because you're divided, two camps, right? Never Trump again after what he's done, and those who, no matter what he says, like you said before, he can shoot somebody on Fifth in New York City, and he'll be fine with it. I think he's hoping that maybe he wins and maybe he'll pardon himself. I don't know.
that's what I was
He
wondering.
has
I'm like,
self-pardon.
I asked my husband, I said, can you pardon your own son? Like right now, what's going on? Can
He
you
might.
can you pardon your own son, or can you pardon yourself? Like, I mean, if the corruption is, like that, I mean, why
It's
not?
unacceptable. It's unacceptable. You shouldn't be able to do any of that.
Shouldn't be able to, no. You
And
shouldn't be able to pardon yourself or your son or whoever.
yeah, will Joe Biden pardon Hunter? Maybe. If this
That's
felony gun charge doesn't go away now, his plea deal fell apart. I wrote a book about that. We'll see with the whole thing with RFK Jr. and all that. It's interesting what's going on there. So a lot of interesting dynamics. We'll also talk a little politics. But if you like everything we're talking about, please check out my books on Amazon. Ignacio J. Esteban. Check out Laura's book also. Like I said, you can also reach out to me on Facebook. I think Tracy reached out to me on Facebook. I think she's a friend of mine now, and Trace and Facebook. And also, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Goodreads too. I do a lot of stuff I post a lot on Goodreads also. So a lot of different spots there. I'm not a big fan of Instagram, but occasionally I do post on Instagram. But I kind of like, and I definitely don't do TikTok. I just do not like
Yeah.
TikTok at all, especially with the Chinese, with the communist Chinese. I'm not a fan
Hmm.
of keeping any personal information of mine and what they can do. So just be careful. There may be legislation down the road. Be careful with TikTok. I mean, that is, man, remember who's that? The CCP is our enemy. That's probably the biggest threat we have to democracy. They want to be the big dog and they want to knock us out. So we have to be careful with the CCP.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ignacio, for your time. If you don't have anything else, thank you so much for answering all my strange questions, and
Absolutely,
yeah, I
Tracy.
look forward to reading some of your books. I also read, other than ATF Undercover, I want to put a plug in for Psycho Killers. Is that
Oh,
what it's
thank you.
called?
Yeah, Psycho
Yeah.
Killers. Yeah.
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 Psycho Killers is, tells you about Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, as you would imagine, and you go into really good detail. And I like how you
You were in
basically give
California.
an agent perspective workup of
Yeah.
these people, like profiling them, which I really like because it reminds me of the Mindhunter show, which I think is a fake show, but it's like where the FBI agent profiler goes in and profiles those
And
types.
especially you're in California, two big ones are Richard Ramirez and Joseph D'Angelo. The original Night Stalker, and then the Night Stalker himself, Ramirez. I guess they changed his name to the Golden State Killer for
Yeah,
D'Angelo. So you had some big ones right there in your area back in the '80s, and how they
yeah,
caught up.
Manson, right?
Yep,
Manson.
Charles
We did
Manson.
actually, yeah, actually, we prosecuted Squeaky Fromm. When Squeaky Fromm, she was a Manson follower.
Mhm.
She actually went after, I don't know if it was Jimmy Carter or what. Oh, Ford, Gerald Ford. She went after. She tried to shoot the president here in Sacramento downtown, and she pulled out a gun and everything. And agents stopped her, and we had a whole panel of judges and retired judges and agents that spoke about the Squeaky Fromm case. And if you don't mind answering one more question, Tracy is asking here. Speaking of psycho killers,
Go
Ignacio, what is your take on this? The Giggle Beach serial killer.
You see that? That's something very typical. Doctor, Jekyll and Hyde, right? They have their
Mhm.
day lives, and then they commit house of horrors at night, right? He was a prominent accountant in New York City, right? And then he'd be doing this also.
Prominent
Architect,
architect, owner of his firm in Manhattan and all
right?
that. Yeah,
Yeah, you look at people like Bundy. He was going to law school. He was also working with the city and the state, working with missing women, right? Right. He
yeah,
would work, and then he's looking what's going on, and by night he'll make them disappear. So a lot of this guy I see it's a pattern where they have to hide up. I mean, Bundy's girlfriend lived with him, living with a serial killer for years. And she has some suspicions later. So if those things interest you, you like all this stuff, check out Psycho Killers. I'm hoping to have more books out on Audible for you guys. And if you're Kindle Unlimited subscribers, all my books are free. So if you're a KU subscriber, all my books are free.
thank you, Ignacio. I hope to talk to
All
you
right.
soon, and take
Okay.
care. Have a
Take
great
care. Yeah.
day.
All right. You too. Thank
Bye.
you.